Welcome to Folding Chair Theology. We're your hosts, Justin Mercier and Bruce Pagano, and this is Theology for Everyone. Welcome back to Folding Chair Theology. I'm Justin Mercier here with Bruce Pagano, and today we're going to be diving into Chapter 6, The Second Command, written from the Three Commands book, written by ours truly, Bruce Pagano. Bruce, how are you?
Doing good. How are you doing?
Good, man. So we got over the 4th of July weekend, and now we're into mid-July already.
Mid-July.
How's things been going for you?
Good, man. Like, I'm in the middle of a, not remodel. I'm not remodeling anything, but we're upgrading, like, we're touching up the kitchen cabinets, and we're going to put flooring. So, I, for sure, didn't have plans to do any kind of work like that on the house for the summer.
Right.
I like, fully intended on doing as little as possible this summer.
Right.
And it turns out that's not the case.
It's like when people always say, like, when after they retired, and they're like, I'm more busy retired than I was ever working. You know?
Yeah. Although I never understood when people were like, I couldn't not work because, like, I'd get bored. And I'm like, dude, you have no life. Because I would love not to work because there's so many things that I want to do that don't include working.
Right. Yes. Exactly.
I would do so many things.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that there's plenty of Netflix to fill in the gaps.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, and I think it was like 4th of July, Hamilton got released on Disney Plus.
Yep.
Did you watch it?
We haven't watched it yet.
Oh my gosh. Let me tell you, I won't give you spoilers.
All right.
Absolutely amazing. Now, for me, like, I don't know, I'm not like a history buff, about Alexander Hamilton necessarily. So all this stuff they could have told, in that story, I don't know. But let me tell you, the way they did it, completely different than anything I've ever seen. And I would pay big money to go see that in person.
And that's a lot of people. Like, I heard one person that was just kind of downing on it and was just like, I can't believe people paid. And the person he was talking to was like, I would pay $600 a seat again.
Oh, absolutely.
And I like musicals anyway, so, like, I'm actually surprised that me and the wife haven't found time to sit down and watch it.
Yeah. Well, it's 3 hours. It's 3 hours long.
Right. So we'll watch it. We have kids, so we'll watch it in, like, 7 sittings.
Yeah. Exactly.
But, we enjoy musicals anyway. Like when The Greatest Showman came out.
Oh, yeah.
One of my wife's favorite movies is Moulin Rouge, which is... Don't watch Moulin Rouge. It's not a good movie. Yeah, it's a good movie, but it's not a good movie.
Sure. But this will blow your socks off.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, it is absolutely amazing.
I like Lin-Manuel anyway.
Very talented.
Mary Poppins. My mother-in-law was like, I won't watch Mary Poppins, the new one, because it's not Julie Andrews.
Oh, sure,
but she did such a good job. And it's got Lin-Manuel on it.
Yeah. No, I absolutely loved it. It really is an amazing play.
We plan on watching it.
Absolutely.
We have the soundtrack. I love the soundtrack.
I actually ended up, like, listening to the soundtrack after I watched it, because I honestly, like, you ever watch that show, Impractical Jokers? You ever watch that?
Yeah.
Well, one of the running jokes they say all the time is, hey, do you want to go to Hamilton? Like, if they're, like, trying to, like, pick up a girl or whatever, Right. And I just thought, like, oh, it must be a Broadway play. Now I've seen Hamilton, and I'm like, whoa, this is amazing. Yeah. Of course you would want to say, you want to go to Hamilton? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like, so...
so that's a job right there, where if I retired, and they're like, no, just run around and prank people with your friends and make it a real thing.
Exactly. Absolutely. I am down for that, for sure. Another thing I wanted to just do a really quick shout out. So I posted on our social media on Instagram. I like to post, Bible verses or quotes, a lot of folding chairs. I posted this really cool camping folding chair I found online. But this was back from a camping folding chair. And McKinney Farms commented, I just asked, with the camping chair, what are some of your favorite, like, camping stories? I just want to give her a shout out. I love her comment. She said her and her boyfriend, who's her husband now, went camping, and it's something to the fact of the bathroom lantern went out, and it was pitch black, and they couldn't see. And anyway, basically something happened really bad with the bathroom. It was really embarrassing. and then he asked for like the blessing to marry the daughter. Like,
oh, nice.
So yeah, it was really cool. I really appreciated the comment. So McKinney Farms, I appreciate you commenting, and definitely other people who were on our social media, definitely give us a shout out and a comment, and
cool.
Hopefully we'll shout you out on the podcast here. So
can we talk about what we're drinking?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
So when we went,
you can't see it unless you go to the YouTube page here.
Yeah, but we just have these little
my hands on
Glencairn glasses, which are like these little bell-shaped glasses.
Very fancy.
They're good for drinking a dram.
A dram, that's right. Yes.
A dram of whiskey.
Yeah.
But anyway, when we went to Scotland a couple summers ago, we went to Edinburgh, and in Edinburgh, right at the base of the castle, there's the Scotch whiskey experience.
Ooh, yeah.
And it's this cool. So my daughter was 3.5 at the time.
Okay.
And so they put you in this like little car, and then like it's like a little ride.
Oh.
The first part.
No way.
And there's like the ghost of like one of the guys that like was a master distiller.
Yeah.
Back in like the 1500s, and his ghost is like taking you on this experience and telling you about stuff. And she's 3, and at the end of it, you get to whiskey taste. Like you get to like taste different types of whiskeys because so Scotland Scotch whiskey,
right?
Depending on where it comes from in Scotland, very different tastes.
Oh,
different flavors.
Yeah. Which you have a scratch and sniff thing with it.
Which we do have a scratch and sniff.
Yeah, I got to sniff it. It was great.
Yeah. You get to sniff my scratch and sniff.
Yeah.
At the end, you get to pick different whiskeys that you want to try. And they kind of tell you this is a Highland, this is a Lowland, this is Speyside, this is an Islay. And then the kids get something called Urn Brew, which is a carbonated Gatorade, but sweeter. Like, for all intents and purposes, it's a carbonated Gatorade.
Yeah.
So she's 3.5, and she's carrying around this Urn Brew, and she's like, "This is my whiskey."
Oh.
And we're just like, "Stop it!
Yeah.
Stop. What are you doing? Be quiet."
Right. Yeah.
And then for like a week and a half after that, people would be like, "Oh, what's your name, sweetheart?" And she'd be like, "Whiskey."
Oh, yeah.
So she made us call her Whiskey
wow.
for a little bit after that. But one of the ones that we tried was this Scotch called Auchentoshan.
Yeah.
And Auchentoshan is 12. This one's a 12-year-old, aged for 12 years, and it's a lowland Scotch. So,
got it.
Auchentoshan. It's hard to find, but we were ironically in South Dakota in Rapid City.
Yeah.
And found it in Rapid City, South Dakota. But we can't find it here.
Yeah. Right.
Which is weird to me. Anyway, so that's what we're drinking. We're drinking a 12-year-old Auchentoshan.
Yeah.
Lowland Scotch.
Well, I appreciate it. It's very smooth. And I really appreciate. I watched. I want to say it's on Netflix. They have a full bourbon history documentary, and then,
is that neat?
Yep, neat. Yep, and then the Scottish whiskey one is right after that. Right. And what's cool is that I learned that when they are done charring these brand new barrels and using them for the bourbon in Kentucky, that a lot of times the Scottish companies, in
order for it to be bourbon,
right,
you have to use a newly charred
brand new oak barrel. Yep. And then what they would do is that then Scotland and different places would buy those barrels that had been for that are already used but already have all those smoky flavors and everything, and then they'll put their barley and or whatever it is, and then make their Scotch. So and I love the fact that it starts off white and then it changes to this amber.
And little note that Scotch and beer are cousins because up to a certain point, it's the same process.
Oh, interesting.
Before they start distilling, it's the same fermentation process.
Oh, interesting.
The mash up to that point, could be beer.
Wow.
And then it's whiskey.
That's awesome. Well, I learned through those documentaries that things like bourbon and Scotch and that sort of thing. It's for friends to get together and just hang out.
Don't save the bottle.
Exactly. Don't save the bottle. It's not worth as much as the friendship.
So after I watched Neat,
I
I felt so American. Like I felt like the most American thing I could do was go drink bourbon right at that moment. Like I was like,
I went and bought a bottle.
Yeah. I was just like, this, like, forget apple pie.
Right.
You like, you want to be American?
Yeah.
You drink a bourbon right now. And
Right.
You drink it neat.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. You know? Exactly.
And I was just like, like, and 20 years in the military.
Yeah.
I've had moments of being proud of my country and
sure.
Moments of just like disappointed in my country.
Yeah.
But at that moment, like, I was the proudest I'd been to be an American at any moment. I was just like,
oh yeah,
golly, man, Lee Greenwood, sing it, man,
sing
it.
Well, there's a part in that documentary that really made me actually get kind of emotional, and it was when the guy who had been working at the bourbon factory there in Kentucky, like his dad, distillery. That's what. But his dad worked in that same distillery, and he said
worked his way up from like sweeping.
Yeah. Oh yeah, like all the way up to like a master guy, and he was telling a story about how, like him and his dad had some sort of an estrangement, and then threw a bottle of bourbon from that place. Yeah. They just drank it for like hours and hours. Him and the two sons or something like that. And they were able to reconcile, and then he ended up dying shortly after that. And it's kind of a cool story.
And it was that story that he was just like, you don't save. Like,
exactly. That was the story. He was like, you don't save the bottle, you drink it.
This was like a 120-year-old bottle of Scotch.
Oh, it was like, it was like
dumb. Like, it was one of the first bottles that he got when he started working there, and it was already like,
it was super old. Yeah. And they were like, that bottle is worth like so much money. He's like, yeah, but my dad was worth way more than that, like
and the time that we spent was
exactly.
worth more than that. Yeah.
So I appreciate you sharing that with me, and look forward to drinking more of it. So, well, cool. Well, we're talking about this chapter 6, the second command. Now we just obviously got done with the greatest command before that, and then before that was the new command. Yep. And so we're wrapping this up, and so
this is the end of part 2.
Yes, end of part 2. Yeah, this is chapter 6, and just the quick verse that is at the very top of it here is, and the second is like it: love your neighbor as yourself. And so, tell us a little bit about, you started this chapter obviously talking about the Pharisees asking this question of Jesus. What is the greatest command, that sort of thing, and the response you had in here was this kind of this equal playing field between the greatest command and the second command. Right. Tell us, a little bit about, about how that being on the kind of the same playing field as love the Lord God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength. Also, love your neighbor as yourself. This is like the greatest command. Right. So tell us a little bit about that hierarchy. That equal. That
equality. Yeah. So, in chapter 9, I get a little bit more into the neighbor thing, just a little bit. Yeah. From the sense that, because chapter 9 is about going and doing the same, and the Good Samaritan. Story. If you're not familiar with the Good Samaritan story, I think we've talked about it. And
that's actually in this chapter as
well. Oh, it is. It is in this chapter. Yeah, you're Samaritan. Okay, so the equality between those two, I think what Jesus was doing, and there's a lot of scholarship on this, and there's a lot of theology in this, but what Jesus was doing was, so I think we talked about previously that the 10 Commandments, that the first 5 were about loving God. Yeah. And the second 5 were about people, like loving people. Yeah. And I think Jesus is doing this thing where he brings those two things together and kind of remeshes them back together. Because up to this point, the Pharisees had become this very legalistic, the way that you treated other people was based on class and not God's law. Right. And so they come to Jesus, and we talked about this last episode, but they come to Jesus and they're like, what's the greatest command? And they're looking for him to answer, love the Lord your God, because that's what they prayed.
They're trying to trick him in a sense.
Right.
Yeah.
And so he knows what they're expecting him to answer, and they know what they're expecting to answer.
Yeah.
And just like Jesus does, he expands on that and throws this kind of curveball to him, and says, "Love your neighbor as yourself." And so they don't even question the fact that he makes the second one the same.
Yeah.
Where he's like, it's like it. Loving God, loving your neighbor is like loving God.
Mm.
And they focus on, okay, then who's our neighbor? So they didn't even question that he puts them on equal playing field, and says everything that the prophet said, all of the laws that you've written and are following, everything, rests on these two commands, like love God and love your neighbor. Entail all of the law, all 613.
Yeah.
And so they get into this, like, who's your neighbor? Like, who's our neighbor then?
Right. Yeah.
And if we haven't talked about this, we'll talk about it. But at that point, neighbor meant a lot of different things.
Right.
And we talked about it in the new command. It didn't include just the average Jew.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Oftentimes it was the person, like, physically living next to you,
right,
or in the same house as you, if they weren't family, or someone that you had an affinity with. Like, so if you shepherd in the same area as someone, or like your field was next to someone and you shared this affinity, you shot the market and saw the same guy over and over. But if you didn't know the Jew, they weren't really your neighbor. But then also the sojourner, like the person traveling through Jerusalem who was a foreigner.
Right.
It applied to them too. So they would attach that. Oh, okay, they're my neighbor. We don't plow the edge of our fields because the homeless and the sojourner might need food. You know.
And I think about Boaz in that way, where like they would just they would leave some of the wheat behind, and then the poor people could come in and they would be able to
or the person traveling through could come in and that's that's Jesus and the disciples were doing that, where they were picking kernels and eating it, and they got called out for harvesting wheat on the Sabbath.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so
big no in that day.
Right. Yeah. A lot of things Jesus did were big no-nos.
Yeah. Right.
So they're like, who's your neighbor? And then he launches into this Good Samaritan story, and kind of gets into this this idea that, and he asks him at the end, like, who's the one that would be this person's neighbor, who acted like the neighbor? And they were like, the one that showed him mercy. And his instructions were go and do the same. So kind of leading into that, the intention here is there's this intentional connection that Jesus makes between loving God and loving your neighbor. And the reason why I put them in this order, instead of saying, here's the greatest command, here's the second command, and here's this new command that Jesus gave them, the reason I put it new command first, and then love God, and then love your neighbor. So love each other, love God, love your neighbor, is that the one, because we live in the new covenant. Right. We live inside of the new covenant, and the new covenant is wrapped up in this command of Jesus to love each other. It's the only thing that he says, this is my command, that you love each other the way I've loved you. That's how people will know your mind, is that the love you have for one another. Right. And I think it's inside of a community that's practicing that command that we get to experience the fullness, because he came to fulfill the law in a lot of different ways. And one of those ways is our ability to experience the fullness of interacting with God in a love relationship. So that new command moves us toward experiencing the greatest command, and then equips us, experiencing the greatest command equips us to love our neighbor and fulfill and experience the second greatest command. Yeah. Which is like it. Right. For the purpose of invitation into the new command, the new covenant, right? Right. And so that's kind of that leading into it.
Cool.
Yes.
No, that's great. No, I appreciate that, and I know you kind of go over the Samaritan story in this chapter as well. But one of the stories that you actually have in here is this wedding feast. Right. What I love about this wedding feast, just not only studying it, but also watching it on, I think the Chosen
yeah.
was what I loved about this is this. I never really understood this before. Jesus wasn't going to this marriage feast to do a miracle.
Right.
He was just going because as part of the town, this is a big celebration.
Right.
And obviously Jesus and God they're in the marriage.
Right.
He's in the marriage. And he's just going as one of the townspeople just to...
Right, and so where he grew up in Nazareth, and I point this out, like,
that's right,
it's only 4 miles from Canada.
Right, yeah. Right.
So
yeah,
it's the equivalent to driving to a friend's wedding for a couple hours.
Yeah, right.
That walk.
Yeah. Yeah.
So at some point, he was either connected enough to this family that he was present there,
right.
and the fact that the mom... That Mary had knowledge of what was going on with the wine, which the master of ceremonies didn't even have that knowledge.
Right.
There seems to be an obvious connection between the Jesus's family, Mary's family, and them.
Right. Yeah.
And this family. So he's there as a guest. Like, he's certainly there as a guest.
He's just there as a guest. And what I love is, obviously, one of the big things that you talk about throughout your entire book is adequately estimating someone's need and then providing for that need, without expectation. Right. And one of the things that you're pointing out here is that, so for them in this time frame, at this wedding, if they run out of wine, it's really kind of like shameful.
It's embarrassing.
It's embarrassing. And you're like, I just invited my whole town and I don't have enough food to like feed them. They probably grew up with me. They've watched me. They've taught me. But I can't provide wine for them. And that's like a big thing. And so typically by the end of the night, people have had a lot of wine, that sort of thing. And they'd start watering it down. So people didn't think anything of it because it was just junk wine. Right. And what's interesting is that not only does
it's like going from Akantoshan at the beginning, and then Jack Daniels later.
Right.
Where you're just like, I don't even care.
I don't even care anymore. Yeah, and so that's what the people are expecting. That's what this group is expecting. Now, Jesus surely could have, once the decision is made, okay, I'm going to go ahead and perform this miracle. Could have been the waterest down, cheapest version.
Sure. Jesus
is like, not only am I going to bless you as this new marriage, I'm going to bless everybody.
Right.
Then they start drinking this wine, and they go, hold up, wait, hold on. Like, you saved your best wine for us at the end? Like, that's when people would just, like, give us the crappy stuff, and then they're all blessed from it.
Right.
And then you see with the Chosen, which I appreciate that they did this, is that you kind of see Jesus, like, laughing with his friends and that sort of thing. He's not drinking the wine, but he's, like... He's laughing with his friends and he's having a good time and that sort of thing. Little do they all know that they were just blessed by Jesus.
Right.
Like, so I love that there was no expectation.
People that knew were Mary and the people that he instructed to fill the cisterns.
And I think eventually what we call doubting Thomas, right? Isn't that where he ends up starting with the ministry? I think from what the Chosen was saying.
I think so.
And so it's just really kind of cool. It's just like... so too can we, especially as Christians who follow this, I think this also just gives us the ability to go, whatever situation I'm in, if God is prompting me to bless others, or if I see a need for whatever party or event or whatever, us too can bless them. And not just bless them with whatever the cheapest option is, but really bless them.
Right, and I think that's the point that I'm trying to make is that I even like, okay, I wrote, like, you may be asking, how does turning water into wine equate to loving your neighbor? And it's that accurate estimation of their need, an adequate supply of it, and in this case, an abundant supply of it, with no expectation. Like,
and no one knows about it.
And he didn't even need anyone to know.
No one even knew about it,
And just getting to the point where, look, loving your neighbor doesn't have to be this, like, well, I paid their rent for the next year. Like, loving your neighbor doesn't need to be this big, huge thing.
Yeah.
There's power in the small acts. There's power in the small moments of relationship that are built that lead toward the ability to do really great things for them and with them. But more than that, invite them into a place where they can discover Jesus.
Right.
and start asking, what is, like, why would you, like, what is this, why would you do this, and you get to say Jesus,
right?
Jesus, that's why.
Yeah. And even so more, if you bless somebody or you're blessing a group of people, if they don't know that you did it, the Bible talks about how that will be your reward in heaven. Is that, and so we're so quick to just post on social media, like, oh yeah, look what I did. I brought this turkey for Thanksgiving to this family who needed it. It's kind of like, what if we just didn't do that? Like, but I mean, I'm sure people want kudos and that sort of thing, and they should get it. But this is just a great invitation to say.
Yeah, and you're right. Like, I'm all about making sure people are honored inside the kingdom.
Absolutely.
But maybe, just maybe, your ability to serve people and not let your right hand know what your left hand is doing.
Yeah.
Maybe that's for those outside the kingdom.
Yeah.
And maybe it's the people in the kingdom that are like, man, like, I see the good things that your heart is doing, and they get to honor you in that place, and you don't do it for that because the praise of men, that's your reward.
Yeah.
But we get to encourage each other and edify each other and be like, look, I see you working for the Lord. And we just at staff meeting today at the church, one of the things we talked about was, hey, who can we honor? Who do we see just really giving their heart, and we can honor them and let them know and give them a little something that says, hey man, like, we really appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, cool.
Because it's important. Like, I mean, anyway.
No, I appreciate it, and I this is the last thing I wanted to say on this is that, so a friend of mine, him and his family moved out full time to Madagascar.
Oh.
And I talked to him today, so he's got internet and that sort of thing, so we can FaceTime or Facebook message each other. But we're really good friends. He was a youth pastor here, and then his heart was in Madagascar, so they all moved in. And they're in total lockdown right now. And one of the things that he was telling me was that because they're on full lockdown from COVID, still, I think they went back into lockdown. Like, he was saying something to the fact of, like, you have to be home by noon. Like, you have had to do all your shopping and everything by noon, and they have to be back home. And only one person from your family can go at a time. And he was saying because of that, people have not been able to make money. So they've been coming to his house and eating his eggs, his beans, his rice, the oil, all that kind of stuff. And the cool thing is that he wasn't asking me for money or anything like that. He's just like, the Lord is providing. We've got really great people sponsoring us. And he goes, I just need encouragement. I'm like, God will give you encouragement all day. But I also, eventually, I want to be able to give him money too, because I can feed his village of people for like $200 for like the whole month. Like, because, it's pretty cheap. But anyway, so that's just one of the things that I kind of thought of as just like, sometimes even just encouraging somebody who might just need some encouraging, that could be all that they need to get them through that next step.
For sure. Absolutely.
So then we kind of talked about, so you talked about like who's our neighbor and that sort of thing. And I don't know, did you want to go over the Samaritan story for anyone who just doesn't know it, or
yeah, I mean, like, so there's actually, Jesus interacts with a couple Samaritans.
Yeah.
And so the point, the reason that I bring up the wedding feast, to me, the wedding feast, so these are your neighbors.
Yeah.
Right. I'm bringing up your neighbors.
Yeah.
And the wedding feast is easy because it's people you like being around.
Yeah, and there's a real party.
And there's a party, and your ability to just, contribute to that party. It's the potluck. You bring you bring the good mac and cheese.
Yeah, exactly. I usually bring my appetite, but that's,
Yeah, or that. But you don't throw together some garbage broccoli salad or something.
Right, yeah. Unless you are a person who brings broccoli, and
then
you need something
whatever. I guess you need broccoli salad, but mac and cheese.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Mac and cheese is where it's at.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm down for that.
Also, the last potluck I went to, they had cowboy salsa.
Ooh.
Which is like corn and some other stuff in it. Lime, and it was banging. Like, it was so good. I have no idea what was in it. Cilantro. I tasted cilantro.
Yeah.
It was good.
Exactly.
Anyway, there's some beans in there.
But and you almost look like you've lost weight. You look good.
Did I? Oh, thanks, man. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Oh, you look good. Speaking of food.
The only thing I ate today was cake before we went out on our date. So, I mean...
that's the most important meal of the day.
Yeah. Eat cake and you'll look great.
Yeah, that's the motto. Eat cake and you'll
It's a great motto. Great slogan.
Yeah.
So the wedding feast is easy because those are... Now, your Samaritan is the other... Is another type of neighbor. And we all have Samaritans in our life.
Yeah.
And those are the people during biblical times that the Jews looked down on. They did not like the Samaritans. They were northern kingdom. Judah had been destroyed up to that point, and they're kind of this mixed remnant of they believed in God.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
They believed that, and there's a lot to it, but they believed that they had the place of worship. The Jews were like, no, you don't. Destroyed it.
That's right. Yeah, right, exactly.
And so they looked down on the Samaritans more than they looked down on the status of a woman. And they did not look favorably on women.
I think they, at one point, one theologian, or I don't know if theologian or what, but they said that the Samaritans, they would categorize them as the logs used to keep hellfires hot.
Yeah.
That's what the only good thing that they were there for.
That's all they're good for.
Yeah.
Right. And so Jesus interacts with the couple, tells a story about the Good Samaritan, which is the guy gets jumped by bandits, beat up on the side of the road, left for dead. Religious scholar or a Pharisee walks by, sees him, crosses the other side of the road. Yeah. And there's a lot of speculation as to why that is. Maybe he was probably coming from the temple, and could have stopped, because he didn't need to, people were like, well, he's probably going to the temple and he needs to remain clean.
Oh.
But he was going down the road, which gives an indication that maybe he was going home.
Yeah, they'd say that you always go up to Jerusalem, you always come down from Jerusalem.
And so, nothing Jesus said is inconsequential.
Right, yeah.
So, it was probably very pointed that he was making that point. Yeah. That they could have stopped. They chose not to. Cross the side. A Levite comes by, another high class person. Yeah. Ignores him, crosses the side of the road. And then a Samaritan comes by who, by all accounts, unworthy to touch a Jew for any reason. Yeah. And he comes, treats this guy's wounds, takes him to the inn and leaves him there with the innkeeper and pays for his stay and says, hey, whatever else, I'll pay the rest. Yeah. And then Jesus is like, which one acted like the neighbor? Mm-hmm. And the Pharisee's like, oh, the one that showed mercy. And I always think it's interesting he didn't say, oh, the Samaritan did, because to acknowledge that the Samaritan did. Yeah. So instead he answers, oh, the one that showed mercy, thinking he's being sneaky or something like that. That's kind of how I interpret it, conjecture. Yeah. And Jesus says, now go and do the same. Right. Be like that Samaritan. So that's the one Samaritan. The other Samaritan's the woman at the well. Right. She was a Samaritan. And I love that the way, creative license that the Chosen takes with it, because we don't know some of that interaction. Yeah. But there's this moment in the Chosen where, if you haven't watched it, spoiler. But she's talking to Jesus, and she's like, she says something to the effect of like, do you know? But do you know who I am? And he was like, I came for you. Yeah, I came here for you. And she was just like, I'm going to go tell everybody. And he was like, I was counting on it. Yeah, right. Like I was hoping that you would. Right. And so I like to think, I always kind of liked to think, and the Chosen just kind of enabled that thinking that he went there for her. Like, right. Nothing Jesus did was inconsequential. Right. And so he went there for her. He went there at midday when she would be drawing water, to avoid the crowds, because drawing water was an early morning thing, not a midday thing. Because midday would have been hot. Right. And it was a social gathering. So they would go get water in the early morning, and when it was cool, and they would get their water, and it was a social gathering for women. Right. And so she'd been married 5 times, and she was living with a guy that wasn't her husband. And Jesus shows up there, and he offers her eternal life and to drink from the well that doesn't run dry, and that she would never thirst again, and tells her all the things that she did, but then doesn't condemn her and offers her this way into salvation, into his arms, into his kingdom. And the Jews come by, and they're just like, hey, should we go get food? Or his apostles come by,
Yeah.
disciples come by. Hey,
Yeah.
should we go get food? And he's like, no, I have bread that you. And they're just like, did that lady give him food? Like, what are you doing?
Who took your lunch? Yeah.
And so the point I'm making with this is that there are those people that you think you're better than.
Mm.
They're your neighbor.
Yeah.
And you love them.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think about, I don't know if this correlates, but there's a point where, so after this, the Holy Spirit comes into the upper room with all of these apostles and different disciples and that sort of thing. They ended up going to, I think it was like the temple or something, and they ended up healing, I think it's Peter, right? He ends up healing a lame guy at the gate and that sort of thing.
This is the guy that he says, we don't have coins, but what we do have is this, get up and walk.
Yeah.
This is Peter and James.
And it says that there was like all these people like watching that sort of thing, and he calls to all of them like, brothers and sisters, like this is what this is what we're supposed to do here, and this is what Jesus died for. And it's like to them that probably would have been very, I think it was a Sabbath again, probably very frowned on. Like, how could you heal?
But people got saved.
And then it says that some believed, some didn't, but it was like, but that was the whole thing. Is like that guy had been there forever.
Right.
No one stopped to like try to help pray for this healing. Like, maybe we don't know, but it's like it just was a leap of faith and just goes, you know what, I'm gonna just do what Jesus did. Like,
and that's the thing. Like in the beginning of this chapter, and we talked about it last week. It's not a what would Jesus do question. It's a what did Jesus do. And Peter saw Jesus do that.
He did.
And so Peter was like, I don't have money for you because I'm poor.
Yeah.
But I do have this. Get up and walk.
Exactly.
And
which Jesus had just done previously when they're lowering him down the roof and that sort of thing. Same thing with raising
the guy at the baths.
Yeah.
Where he's like, I can't get to the water when it bubbles, and Jesus is like, pick up your mat and go home. Like,
yeah.
And he did.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And he raises a girl to life. Peter does the same thing, raises a girl to life. Talitha Kuma, whatever, Tabitha, I think it was. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, they watched Jesus do these miracles, and then they did them. And it wasn't like Jesus was like, okay, see these words. And he just he was gone, and they went and did it. And like, I just think that's just amazing. And it still is able to be done today. We just have to have the faith to do it.
So that's the Samaritan.
Yeah.
And then the next part is Roman soldiers and religious experts. And so this gets at the enemy thing, like love your enemy. Right?
Right.
Spoiler alert, they're also your neighbor. Literally, the Romans were living among them.
Oh, yeah.
And persecuting them.
Oh, yeah.
And there's that whole, like, if a Roman centurion tells you carry his equipment for a mile, you carry it for 2 miles. And so that's easy to see because those are very real enemies, and not just theoretical, but crucified Jesus, real enemies.
Yeah.
The religious experts, you have the contrast between Caiaphas and Nicodemus, both in the same order. Caiaphas, Jesus was a very real enemy to him, both personally and on an institutional level. He was going to take over. He was proclaiming to be the Son of God. And Nicodemus, part of the same order, viewed Jesus as a teacher and in fact participated in his burial, paid for, came out, his first meeting with Jesus is at night, but then openly goes to them, is like, can I take his body? Goes, takes his body, places it in, Joseph's tomb or Trent's tomb.
Yeah.
But these are people that institutionally Jesus was an enemy of.
Right.
Personally, Jesus was an enemy of. On a national level, Jesus was an enemy of. And he still, and like I even pointed out, like you might think this is a cop-out, but because what need did he meet of the Romans? What need did he meet of, Caiaphas, these people that were his enemies? The same need that he met for us. Our ability to enter the kingdom of heaven rests in Jesus. And the same way that it does for us, it did for them. And we get to see that later where a Roman centurion sends a servant, is like, heal my master servant sick. can you heal him? And he's like, yes. And he said, but he said, you don't have to come. Just say the words, and he knows that he'll be healed. And what does Jesus say? Yeah. I've never seen faith like this in all of Jerusalem.
Wow. Yeah.
Like a Roman centurion,
right.
an officer of the Roman military sent to persecute and hold down the Jews.
Yeah.
Never seen faith like that of that Roman soldier. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's amazing. And so he very personally meets this need for his very real enemy, who would later be a part of crucifying him.
Right.
On some level.
Right.
He would participate in that.
Yeah.
Same with Caiaphas. Offer, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. And if you think he was just talking about the Romans, guaranteed the high priest was standing there watching him be crucified to make sure that this insurrectionist was done away with.
Right.
For sure, Caiaphas was standing there, or at least had people standing there watching. And Jesus asked for forgiveness for them.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so that's the neighbor. Like, when... I don't want to get on soapbox. I was about to talk about social media.
Yeah, right. Which you can if you want to. You can if you want to.
I just... When I see Christians... being mean and cutting and outright like I expect a lot from our people, from the church. I expect a lot from the body, because Jesus expects a lot from the body.
Absolutely.
And I don't always hold up my end of the deal.
Sure.
I'm a jackwagon sometimes. I say dumb things.
Yeah. Sure.
There's that like. I'm a Christian, but sometimes I drink and cuss a little. Like,
yeah, right.
But when it's the whole like, I need someone in office that's gonna punch the people that have been punching us. I need someone that's gonna attack. Like, no, you don't.
Yeah, right.
No, that's nowhere in the Bible. You don't need someone to fight your battles for you, because you had someone who did that and was victorious.
Right.
And that's it. And he did it so that you could love them, so that you could be kind to them, so that the fruit of the Spirit doesn't include vengeance.
Right, Peter? Like, that's what Peter was. He was like, I'm ready to fight. He was like, no, you're okay. Like, just chill.
He cut off someone's ear in the garden, and Jesus put it back on.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Jesus is like, not only are you wrong in this, I'm gonna put his ear back on me.
I just wonder, like, how many times Jesus along their journey was like, you know what, Simon Peter, you need a timeout. Go sit. No,
like how many times did he say? It's recorded once, but I feel like he probably had to say "Get behind me, Satan" multiple times to Peter. Like Peter's like, again.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and so no, I totally get that, because that's the thing is like, and there's been so many things that have switched my. I should not have switched. I think that my maturity in the Lord has really taken a whole nother level this year, particularly.
Yeah. And
one of the things I think why is I've totally had this shift of my view of church and a view of people as Christians, and that is this, what you're talking about exactly is I'm sure I'm guilty of it, because I'm still learning. Obviously, I'm still like I do still blurt things out that probably aren't like the biggest, the best thing, but it's kind of like how am I coming across? Am I coming across seasoned with salt? Where we talk about that from a cooking aspect. Yeah. Salt enhances the flavors that you're cooking with. And so if the Lord is working in my life, then me speaking with salt, seasoned with salt, is just a much bigger personification of the love that Jesus has within me. So if I'm on social media blasting, going, whatever the hot topic is, or blasting whoever, it's like, I need to take a step and go, you know what, is what I'm saying is going to be a blessing, or is going to be a burden, is going to incite something? And I think that's what's kind of changed everything, is exactly that. one of the things that I'm reading now, I'm studying 2 books, Job and Revelation, which is this is kind of 2 crazy books.
Yeah.
But in Revelation, in the very beginning, through isolation and through separation, John, the author, is in Patmos.
Mm-hmm.
And that through isolation and separation, Jesus is able to give him a new revelation.
Right.
I think what a great time to think about that now, as we're in isolation, as we're in separation. If we wait on the Lord and seek the Lord, what revelation can we also receive from the Lord?
Yeah.
And not like a new revelation, like we're gonna write another.
Start a cult.
No. But like, and I think that's what God has done to me this year, is that through a lot of this isolation and separation, it's given me the ability to go, wow, I've read a couple books. We've obviously started this podcast, and it's like, wow, things. So this is some really great time.
And this week, I mean, we've been talking about like just spiritual gifts and your gift for teaching, and what that looks like to kind of foster that gift and grow it. And a guy at church this week was just like, man, been listening to our podcast, faithful listener. Shout out to Kevin Schneider.
Yeah, right.
Was just like, man, I really think you're a teacher, and it's just not coincidental that that's the thing that we've been talking about, and God confirms that inside of His body, uses people inside His body, and so there's absolutely, man. Like and I'll say this, not to be mushy, but I think I was telling someone the other day that I think it seems to me, just us having gotten to know each other, that this last year at Awaken has been, which is the church we go to, has been just a time of really important healing for you and Jessica, and
absolutely,
and growth, and certainly just some of the things that we've talked about, perspectives and paradigms are shifting, and that's really an important thing, especially when those paradigms shift more toward the gospel, than they had been in the past.
Absolutely.
And hopefully, for all of our life, our paradigm moves more toward the gospel and the kingdom, so that by the time we're done with this life, we are as close to Jesus looking as we can be this side of eternity.
Yeah, exactly. And so I appreciate this next section in your book that you talk about the low and the least, because I think this is very prevalent to what we're talking about today. And that is this concept of, are we sheep or are we goats? Right? And so talk to us a little bit about that.
So I want to make the distinction between the low and the least, and Samaritans. So as far as neighbors go, the Samaritan is someone that you look at and you're like, I'm better than them. The low and the least is someone that you don't even think about. That easily miss your gaze, are outside of your gaze, and whether willfully or unintentionally. So the homeless guy on the corner, we willfully ignore him.
We will not make eye contact,
because if you do, you might have to give him money.
Yeah,
which we all know he's going to spend on alcohol. So that's why we don't give him money. Which is the argument that I've heard. And I used to use, and I remember I was driving through Montana one time, and I was getting off, I got off the highway in Bozeman. And there's this little gas station there. I probably drove that stretch of highway from Rapid City to Coeur d'Alene, where my parents lived, 2 or 3 times a year for 5 years.
Wow.
To go visit them. And there was always this little gas station that we would make it to, in the beginning of Bozeman. We'd get off, and you'd have to go down, pull in the gas station, and then you would have to go down and make a U-turn to go back to the highway.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Around the median. And so I get off the highway, and there's a guy standing there, and I give him $5. I was just like, give him $5. By the time that I got down and flipped the U-turn to get to the gas station, he was already in the gas station in front of me, and I was getting an energy drink and a Tabasco Slim Jim, which I love.
Cool.
It's guilty pleasure. But he was buying 2 tall boys.
Of
Natty Light.
Beer.
With the $5 that I just gave him.
And
I was just like,
dang it.
Man, I got. So it confirmed everything that I thought about giving money to homeless people.
Sure.
Just in that moment.
Yeah.
But seriously though, this group of people, these neighbors of yours are the low and least. And I would say he mentions them repeatedly, and they are mentioned repeatedly in the New Testament.
Yeah.
But it's this group of people where if you're... You know the story. You want to tell the story?
Which story?
Where he's talking about, yeah, but we didn't know you. And he's like, yeah, but if you know what I'm talking about?
I think so. Yeah, well, you go ahead and you
yeah, so...
Yeah.
So Jesus is talking in Matthew 25, and he's talking about there will be those people that that said, I was hungry and you gave them food, and you were thirsty and they were thirsty and you gave them drink.
Yeah.
They were naked and you clothed them. They were sick and you visited them. They were in prison and you visited them. Yeah. And there's this group that's like, we didn't, he's like, when you did that for them, you did it for me. And he was like, this group's like, Jesus, we didn't, like, we did it for them. We didn't know, like, we did nothing for you. And he was like, yeah, but it wasn't me. I knew you the whole time. Like, you were doing it for me.
Right.
And then there's this other group that he says the same thing to, and they're like, Jesus, we did all this stuff. And he's like, yeah, but you never knew me. Like, you just, you were a charity organization. You didn't know me when you were doing this. And so he talks about those groups of people being separated into sheep and being separated into goat, and the goats will be led away into punishment, eternal fire.
Yeah.
And that the sheep will be welcomed in with the good shepherd. And so I just make the point, like, we don't have to guess what gets us in and what gets us out.
Yeah.
Like, we don't have to guess whether or not we're sheep or goats.
Yeah.
Because he tells us exactly what qualifies you for sheep. And we don't do it to qualify for sheep. But this is what sheep do. Like, this is just what they do out of a natural inclination to honor Christ, to lift Christ up, because Christ identifies with the low and least. He is the low and the least.
Right.
He put his divinity, like his majesty, on hold to come down and be this.
Right.
And he says, feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, talk to the stranger, clothe the naked, care for the sick, visit those in prison. And that's it. Like, and so if we're not doing those things, and it's not about doing those things, it's about why we do those things and who we're glorifying when we do those things, and that we do those things.
Yeah.
So.
No, that's so good, because that's the practicality. Like, that's the thing. It's like there's so many times, like what you experienced. There's so many times where we can go, yeah, let's feed the hungry. Well, they can get a job. Well, let's go help the sick. Well, they can go to the hospital. Like, let's go clothe the naked. Oh, they can go to some organization. There's always an excuse of why we don't have to do it. Especially now, there's an excuse to be like, we don't have to do these things. There's some great organization that's super high and mighty. They're just going to do it. But man, I'll tell you, when you do these things, whether they receive it as a gift or not, because most of the time they may not. Like, they're not going to be like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for serving my meal. A lot of times they're just like, give me my food. I'm going to sit down. Don't talk to me about Jesus, because I've heard it 1,000 times from everybody. But it's not about what their response is, but it's about your willingness to serve the Lord through that.
Right.
And so this is very practical, and also a lot of times very uncomfortable for people who are comfortable in their contentment. Like, they're just like, oh man, I need a new Apple Watch, I need the new iPhone, I need the new, Xbox, which coming out. Like,
there's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that, absolutely. But it's like, let's have a balance. Like, let's also be people who go, I am so blessed I get to have the new Xbox that's coming out. I really want it. Maybe for Christmas, my wife will get it for me. But yeah, exactly. Sorry, she doesn't listen to me. No, I'm just joking. She listens.
My wife doesn't listen to the part.
There you go. But But yeah, I mean, I work hard to be able to, to get those things. But I also want to work hard for the kingdom of heaven as well, because it's like, I may not know that person may end up being saved by something that I've done, because I don't save anybody. Like, there's nothing that I do that saves a person. I can only usher somebody into the kingdom to where the Holy Spirit can then save them.
Holy Spirit does the convicting. And that's the thing, like, the point that you're making is everything we do is invitation into the kingdom.
Right.
Everything we do.
Right.
Every interaction we have out with the sojourner, with the stranger who's walking through this land, is invitation into the kingdom. Everything we do.
Yeah.
I'm reading this book called The Tangible Kingdom, and they said there's this part in there that says,
Is it on your Instagram? I thought. Did you post it?
I did.
I'll look it up while you're talking about it.
Yeah, but the thing that they're talking about in there is that the environment that we create, belonging enables belief. That's what they said. Belonging enables belief.
Awesome. That's what. That's what.
And so, And so the point that they're making is when you provide a space for people to feel like they belong, that enables them to begin believing. It affords them the opportunity to believe in the thing that you say you believe in. Who is Jesus? You know what I'm saying? So, So our job is invitation. Everything we do is invitation into this place where you belong here.
Right.
For the purpose of letting the Holy Spirit lead them to a place of belief.
Exactly, because we're that's the thing about being Christians, that we're paid on salary. Like, if you think like I'm keeping count of my salvations and all the people I've led to Christ, just know that you're on salary. So like, you know what I'm saying? Stop keeping track. Like, stop counting all of your...
There's no overtime.
There's no... Yeah, exactly. There's no overtime. It's like... We don't need to continue to keep counting these salvations. Like, well, I did this hunger project and that hunger project and this hunger project. I fed this person. Like, I did 27 good things.
And those people, Jesus is like, I didn't know you, though.
Yeah, right.
I didn't know you.
Right.
And I think it's worth pointing out, and then we can move on because we're at an hour, I think.
Oh, perfect,
But I think it's worth pointing out that Jesus calls them brothers, the low and the least. He doesn't... He intimately identifies with them as brothers and sisters.
Right.
So these aren't just people that he's just like, hey, there's homeless people. He's like, my brothers are homeless. My brothers are hungry.
Right.
My sisters need clothes.
Right.
What are you doing to undo that?
Right.
Where are you finding oppression and working to undo it?
Right.
With a body of people that love you. Because, and I talk about it at the end of this chapter, the unbeliever is not called to love you back. They're just not. And so the accurate estimate and the adequate supply of another's need without expectation.
Yeah.
You do it because you do it.
Yeah.
Because it glorifies Christ.
Right.
Because it lifts him up and it invites in.
Yeah.
And so...
And just a quick example, I thought it was really good. So today, which is July 13th, the Washington Redskins officially said that they're changing their name.
Oh, that's a big deal. Yeah.
It's a big deal because when we talk about oppression, there has been many advocates over the last many years, regardless of how the Washington Redskins got their name, and there's a whole thing about it and that sort of thing. The fact is, there's enough people that said, I feel offended by this, that you're calling us the Redskins. Like, that's an offensive term to the Indian.
And people are going to be ticked. Oh, you're getting rid of the name. We're doing this tradition. But at the end of the day, what's actually happening?
Right. They're changing, and they're saying, we hear what your oppression is, and we also agree. And we want to change it.
And whether they agree or not, they're at least residing in a place where they acknowledge the oppression, or the feelings of oppression, or the impression of oppression. They're acknowledging the pain that it causes, and they're doing the thing that they can do to undo that.
Right.
And the thing that's within their power to undo that is changing the name.
Right.
Getting a new logo.
Right.
Okay. Same team.
Right.
Same players.
Right.
That's like, now you get to be the last generation that says, I was there. I have the shirt. I have the old jersey. You know what I'm saying? Like, whatever.
Yeah.
But whatever's in your power to undo hurt and oppression, you should do it.
Right.
Like the argument shouldn't be, yeah, but it's always been this way.
It's always been this way.
So?
Yeah.
So what?
And people are like, the season ticket holders are so mad. It's like,
then get new season tickets for somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly.
Clearly you're not committed to that team.
Yeah.
Because the team is the people.
Right. Yeah, right. Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
the
team, like, if it came out that the Green Bay Packers, that the name was racist.
Right.
Which I don't know.
Whoever the Packers are. Yeah.
Huh?
Whoever Packers are, if they're like a group of people.
Yeah, like.
Yeah.
And they changed the name. I still like the team that resides in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Yeah, right.
I still like whatever Washington thing they come up with.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's still the same thing. Anyway.
No, absolutely. But I think it's just a good example of like,
yeah.
I mean, we're talking about an NFL team. Like, this is big deal kind of stuff. Like, this isn't just like something small that happened. I mean, this is a multi-billion-dollar company.
But let's qualify big deal also.
Right. Right.
You're getting worked up about a team that you don't own, contribute to.
Yeah.
Play on.
Yeah. Armchair quarterback, right?
That's like you literally don't like.
Yeah.
They're not your team.
Right.
Don't watch them.
Yeah. Exactly.
Don't watch them. Like,
and people have said that they're just like, look, here's the deal. They're changing the name, and that's good. But it's like, if you don't want to watch them, you 31 other teams you can watch.
And they're I'm done with them. Good. You're probably done with them like the people that were like, I'm moving to Canada if so-and-so gets elected.
Yeah, right, yeah.
That still live here.
Live here.
Like, whatever.
Yeah. Kanye 2020, right? That's what they're going to vote for now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a different kind of crazy.
I
love Kanye,
but yeah, so just, I mean, that's a big victory, a small victory. I mean, it's a victory in itself that says we acknowledge. So I just say, hey, let's continue. Continue that until we can really say, maybe oppression will never ever be gone, right? But we can really say, let's work toward. Exactly.
So the last the last thing I want to talk about, it's a couple parts, is he says, love your neighbor as yourself. And so you got to understand what it means when he says yourself. So the Bible doesn't talk a lot about self-love.
Right.
There's only a couple times that it mentions love whoever as you love yourself.
Yeah.
Love your neighbor as you love yourself.
Right.
And love your wife as you love your own body. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Bible does talk about self-sacrifice, self-denial, self-discipline, self-control. Like, it does talk about those things. And those are all like removal of stuff, right?
Right.
And so it becomes really difficult to understand like what it means to love, because a lot of people are like, you gotta love yourself. You gotta love yourself, man. Like, you gotta love yourself.
You can't love someone else unless you love yourself.
A lot of Christians.
Yeah.
And I think if you go looking in the Bible for what that means, you're not gonna find it. Like, it doesn't define what that means.
Right.
Love your wife as you love your own body. Probably some indication there that means like care for her and nurture her so that she grows healthy in Christ, right? But in general, self-love it's not in the Bible.
Right.
So you kind of have to go looking at, okay, so how do I define self-love?
Right.
And I think it's two things. I think it's one, the realization that you're loved.
Right.
Allows you, when you understand the level at which God loves you, the degree to which God loves you.
Right.
For God so loved the world.
And we talked about that.
In this way.
Yeah.
That he gave his son. Right?
Yeah.
And so it all starts with for God so loved. That's the gospel.
Yeah.
The world. You're in that. For God so loved Justin.
Right.
In this way that he gave his son.
Right.
And so there's this degree of, like, we have to understand the degree to which God loves us. Like, he counts the hairs on our head. And some of us don't have a lot of them. But and so the first realization that you are loved so that you can love.
Right.
Like, once you realize, oh, I'm loved.
Right.
The purpose for that is so that I can love other people.
Exactly.
And I pray that for my kids. God, help them to know your love
Right.
So that they can love other people.
Yeah.
Because there's wholeness in knowing God's love that allows you to love other people well.
Right.
Right? And so I don't want my kids to ever question how much me and my wife love them.
Yeah.
The same way I don't ever want them to question how much God loves them.
Right.
And that enables them to love other people.
Right.
The other part is that you're forgiven. And
Yeah.
I think this is where I mention this story about my daughter. And she was 3 or 4 years old at the time, and she'd spilled something, and I'm cleaning it up. She's like, "Oh, sorry, Dada." And I was like, "I know, baby." Like, I was frustrated because I was like, "I know, baby." And she's like, "I'm sorry, Dada." And I was like, "Baby, I know. It's okay.
Yeah.
You know, like, I forgive you. Like, it's okay."
Yeah.
And she just kept on. And you know, I mentioned, like, some of that's probably learned. I think I over-apologize. But she's like, just on, and it kind of made me realize, like, we do that with God, where we're like, "God, I'm so sorry. Like, God,
Right.
please forgive me. God, I'm so sorry."
Yeah.
You're forgiven.
Yeah. Right.
Like, my daughter barely needs to ask for forgiveness.
Yeah.
Where I'm just like, no. Like, I like, no, I love you. Like, it happens. You're a kid. Stop spilling stuff, though, please, for the love. That's why they only get water ever. Because water's easy to clean up.
Yeah.
And it's healthier. That's why we give them water, because it's healthier.
There you go. Yeah, unless it's on electronics. Yeah.
Touche.
Yeah.
But I think once we realize how much we're loved by God and that we're completely forgiven by God, we're able to love others well and forgive trespasses, because we can look at people as they're forgiven. Not that they need forgiving.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So that's the difference between looking at someone and being like, person made in God's image, loved by Him, already forgiven. All they have to do is just confess that.
Yeah.
And that dude's a sinner that needs to be forgiven.
Right.
That dude's guilty.
Mm-hmm.
Just like I was guilty. He's guilty.
Yeah.
And that paints a different picture of that person and changes the way you interact with them.
Right.
So your ability to know that you're forgiven so that you can forgive, and know that you're loved so that you can love, equal this healthy spirituality.
Right.
This wholeness, this completeness. Because you're lovable because God loves you.
Yeah.
Not because of anything you do. You're forgivable because God forgives you.
Right.
Not for anything else.
Right.
And that means everybody else is.
Mm.
Everybody else is lovable. Everybody else is forgivable.
Yeah.
And that's how you love your neighbor as yourself.
Right.
Realizing that they're lovable and forgivable because God said so.
Right.
The same way that I am. And that allows you to extend love and forgiveness to them, compassion. Because when you can know that about yourself, you can have compassion for yourself. That's self-compassion. That's huge in undoing shame. It's huge in dealing with guilt. Like, even just from a psychological standpoint, like a counseling standpoint, if you can build someone's self-compassion, you can counter shame. Like, there's a causal effect there.
Right.
So yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we talked about that, because we're over now.
Well, and I appreciate that, and I think about this is that so in Idaho is obviously, it's big, or was big in gold mining, right?
Yep.
And you can actually still even do it to this day. One of the things I think when we talk about the way that God and Jesus looks at you and I is, you dig up, when you go gold panning, you dig up a big thing of like grass and weeds and dirt and everything, and you put it into this pan, and you let the water wash away.
You just swish it, right?
You just swish it and that sort of thing. The water washes away all the weeds, it washes away the dirt, it washes away all the rocks and the sand, and what's left is the gold.
Mm-hmm.
You could have dug this huge hole, and then that little piece of gold will be worth so much money.
Right.
When you bring it to somebody and then they buy and they melt and that sort of thing. It's the same thing that God does when He looks at us. We can be in some hairy situations. We can definitely get dirty and muddy at times. Sometimes things are real rocky in our life. But it's through all of that and God washes that away with the water of who he is, and then he finds the gold, and he goes, there it is, my precious gold. That's how he views you and I.
Right.
I think that's just so important, because it's like a lot of times we go, I'm just a barren wasteland of weeds and dirt and rock and that sort of thing. And he's like, no, like you are gold, like you're treasure. And so I just think if we start saying that over people, that changes everything for people.
Right. Yeah. I agree. 100%.
So yeah, that, and I mean, and the very last thing is it says all things work together, and
that just leads into the part 3 about why we love.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I love when the Bible says that all things work together for good through, obviously
good of those who love him.
Exactly. And so, any parting thoughts on this?
Let me just read this part, because this leads into part 3, and this will be so. Yeah, let's read it. When we look at all 3 of these commands collectively, we should experience the abundance of life that Jesus spoke of in John 10:10. The new command is intended to draw us into a body of loving people focused on glorifying Jesus. That, in turn, reveals our love for Jesus and the Father, resulting in the fulfillment of the greatest command. It is only then that we are capable and even desire to obey the second command without becoming tired. None of this allows us to sit idle in the kingdom. All of it should move us toward the ministry of reconciliation. And so that leads us into why we do this.
Exactly.
And it's in that that in part 3 we're going to talk about what it means to spur each other on in love, what it means to go and do the same, or go and make disciples, and then what it means to what was part 9? Go and do the same, which is what he told the Pharisee when he told the story of the Good Samaritan. So
yeah, man, very good. Yeah, next time we're going to be going over that chapter 7 and the intro to part 3, why we love. So why do we love? Well, you're going to have to wait until next week when we drop the episode there. So you're not going to want to miss this. So that is our show today. We thank you so much for joining us, and make sure to connect with us on Facebook and Instagram. We'll be able to hopefully give you a shout out right here on the podcast, and we'll be answering some questions as we go along. But for now, we just thank you so much for listening, and until next week, we'll see you then.
Yep, see you then.
Thanks, Bruce.
All right, thanks, Justin.
Thank you for listening to Fold and Share Theology. You can follow Bruce on multiple social media platforms at bpags2, as well as Justin Mercier on Instagram at justinmercier13. Additionally, you can check us out on Facebook and Instagram at Fold and Share Theology. Until then, keep unfolding God's Word each and every day.